Did the counterculture revolution and the hippie movement of the late 1960s happen by accident, or was it planned? Tonight, we're putting forth the thesis that secret societies and people from military intelligence from multiple countries orchestrated and implemented this plan for a very nefarious purpose. Stay tuned to the Midnight Ride, and we're going to ride this one out tonight.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Who is able to make war with him?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Midnight Ride. It is my great honor once again to welcome each and every one of you into the Puritan Barn, into the Now You See TV studios for the Midnight Ride with myself and Jon Pounders. Tonight, we're going to be getting to the origin of predictive programming in Hollywood. We're going to be showing that many things that happened didn't happen accidentally, that there was a guiding hand that shaped the absolute overthrow of the culture and the mores in American society. And you're not going to have to wait very long, because it's time to ride right now, because we're now
live. I had to cover my microphone. Last time I listened to this, I was like, man, I about busted my speakers. So what's up, guys? It's good to see you guys or hear you guys. I can see some of you in the chat. Let us know where you're from. We're excited to do this, excited to be here once again, and excited to bring forth information for as long as we're able to do so, man. And this one tonight will be something that will really make us rethink the world we're living in. And I think especially if you're new to this kind of content and you don't realize what we're in, what this system really is, tonight it'll help it become a little bit more clear. So before we get started, guys, a word from our sponsors. Mainstream companies put dangerous chemicals in their products that contribute to disease and disability. This is why it's so important that we take care in the products that we consume. The skin is the largest organ in your body, and it is the covering to your temple. Our sponsor tonight is Sugar and Spice Soap Company. They create all natural and biblically clean soaps and beauty products. They even have a soap for Midnight Ride listeners. Use coupon code NYSTV to receive 10% off all your purchases. Link in the description. If this is true, then our country is in a lot of trouble.
We would have these trips, these special trips.
But he said, my daddy takes the bodies to the grocery store and he grinds them up and puts it in the hamburger. And nobody ever knows it.
How can kids 6, 8, 10 years old be describing rituals that come from a book like the Book of the Dead?
it's hard to get your mind around people being capable of this kind of evil.
All right, and we're back. And if there's anything you're interested in, check that out. Also on the NYSTV.org, 2 new episodes of our Book of Enoch video commentary that we're going through the entire Book of Enoch will be uploaded this week. So this is going to be really awesome for you, those of you that are following along with that. We have lots of other content on there as well. Also, we want to give a shout out to Truther Fit. These hats are mugs, a lot of stuff. They have a lot of different stuff on there. Go check that out if you are interested in getting new shirts, new hats, whatever it is. Check it out. Links in the description. And David, I know you guys have some new stuff going on this week as well as even the new Doctrine of Christ YouTube channel.
We do, and we've been working on, and me a little bit, Brian Reese a lot, working getting that YouTube channel up, and also Jillian Stone, and it is up. We don't have any content on it, but it is up where you can subscribe, and we're going to be working on that and developing it. It's going to be cracking off here real soon. So I think John put the link in the chat. Is that right?
That's right. It's posted in the chat.
All right. You can subscribe there, and also you can go to our Underground Church YouTube channel on our community page. There is a post there. You can subscribe there also.
Just for people to know, if you type in on the search at the Doctrine of Christ 24, you can find it on YouTube as well. But it is pinned in the comment section right now.
Very good. And also Sunday Night Live, 7 p.m. Central. We're going to have, Brian and I are going to be having a presentation called Ancient Monsters of the Apocalypse. Guaranteed to be frosty. Guaranteed.
Guaranteed to be frosty. So this is guaranteed, guys, for you to enjoy this. I guarantee you'll enjoy this. If you don't enjoy this, you can write a letter to David and tell him how much you don't enjoy
We'll
this,
give you your money back.
Yeah,
we'll
give money
we'll
back
refund
guarantee.
your money if you don't like it.
Money back guarantee.
You know,
so
what can you say?
Yeah, what do you have to lose? With that being said, guys, here we go. Grab your popcorn, your coffee, whatever you're drinking tonight, and enjoy the show. So, David, bring us on the ride.
All right. And, you know, it has always been something that has nagged at me, and I know a lot of us, you know, this idea of predictive programming. You know, you watch stuff in movies, and then a few years later it happens. And over again, we see this to where it's undeniable. Well, how does that happen? You know, and I think we might have a few answers about how that happens. It might become a little bit clearer that there is definitely guiding hands behind all of these things that are orchestrating it. And absolutely, you'd have to have control right there in Hollywood. And we're going to be looking at a lot of this evening and coming up with some answers. And I wanted to start by putting up the cover of this book, Transhumanism by David Livingstone. And this is an excellent researched book. And his chapter on the Church of Satan in this book was my basic input, my basic motivation and kind of a template for where I began and went off in different directions tonight. But credit where credit's due, and we'll be reading a few snippets from this. But we're going to begin by tracing the occult influence in America, which began in Southern California. And we're going to begin with a couple people that I bet no one's ever heard of. And this first lady here is Jane Wolfe. And Jane Wolfe was a silent movie actress, and she was a personal colleague of Aleister Crowley. And her and this next fellow we're looking at, Mr. Wilford Smith, in 1935 in Los Angeles, they founded the Agape Lodge of the Ordo Templar Orientis. And this became the springboard for everything. And like I say, Miss Wolfe was a personal colleague and worker with Mr. Crowley. She got it straight from the devil's mouth, I guess you could say. And the lodge they founded in 1935, the Agape Lodge of the Ordo Templar Orientis, in 1942, it was taken over by Jack Parsons, who many of you know from Operation Paperclip, the Rocket Man himself. And the Agape Lodge moved to Pasadena and was ran out of the home of Mr. Jack Parsons. And things really began to roll from there. And some of the people that remember this OTO Lodge, someone here that is a very familiar face, Mr. Dennis Hopper. And Mr. Hopper was known for doing wild and crazy things. And some of the roles he played were so creepy and so dark that it's disturbing even to think about. But he was a huge figure in the counterculture movement. We're going to be pointing out the role that he played in several different instances. And he was a member of this Agape Lodge there. And this next fella here, Mr. John Carradine, He was also a member of the Agape Lodge of the OTO, and the whole Carradine family were very known in Hollywood. They were a acting dynasty, and his son David Carradine, he died in a very disturbing way, and I'll just let you look that up and Google it yourself. But a very bizarre and troubling death that his son David endured. Now, this fella here who ran this Agape Lodge, he was Mr. Connected in all directions. Jack Parson, who was the founder of the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, he was instrumental in the developing of the early rocketry, very much involved in Operation Paperclip with von Braun and all the boys. And it's very well known that he and Mr. Parsons, or excuse me, him and this next fella here, L. Ron Hubbard, in 1946, they did what was called the Babylon Working. And it was their goal to bring forth a child totally by magical ritual. And they were doing a little more than the magical ritual, but they would correspond, and the letters have now been discovered of the personal letters that they would write to Aleister Crowley, and he would advise them on this ritual. In 1946. There's some people that believe, and this is, you can just take this for whatever you think it's worth, but some people believe that Hillary Clinton was the moon child. Now, it fits in a lot of ways, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But I'll just put it out there for no extra charge there. Now, L. Ron Hubbard, who was the founder of Scientology, he was well known, and he was a science fiction writer. And he made the statement, if you want to get rich, start your own religion. And he did. And he was the founder of Scientology. And this is another one of those foundational groups that what we're going to do, we start here with this Agape Lodge. And we're going to look, we've got Parsons, we've got Hubbard, and we're going to run it off like spokes of a wheel from this Agape Lodge. And then we're going to look at another lodge of the Ordo Temporal Orientis called the Solar Lodge. And from these two lodges of the OTO, everything comes off like spokes of a wheel. And we can see the orchestration of the entire transformation of American culture. Now, this is the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society. And as you could see, it was established in 1934. And Mr. Hubbard was already an established writer of science fiction. And he and Mr. Parsons and the boys down from the Agape Lodge, they started this little group. And it was for science fiction writers. Now, this became terribly successful. And out of this group where Jack Parsons would speak and give lectures, here you got the Rocket Man, and he's talking, they're founding here this science fiction, the Science Fantasy Society. And the people that were a member of this group, there's basic scenarios in every science fiction movie. You've got the impregnation by the alien. You've got the world being created by E.T. All of these basic scenarios can be traced back to three men that were in this Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society. And they're called the Big Three of science fiction. And the first gentleman here is Ray Bradbury, who was just huge. And the other fella here, Arthur C. Clarke. And Arthur C. Clarke, he needs no introduction, Childhood's End, and the many, many works that he did. And this third fella here, Isaac Asimov. These were all members of the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society. And these people were very much influenced by sources. They were brilliant. And they were great writers and all of that, but there was a guiding hand that guided these people. And you can see the guiding hand, definitely. They were not believers, and there was a dark spiritual element behind it, but there was also direct human intervention that was putting ideas in their head, that were driving things in a certain direction. And everything that we see and hear comes back to, they call them the big three: Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, and Isaac Asimov. Now, here's another fella that is just absolutely amazing. He was a member of this Los Angeles Science Fantasy Club. His name is Willie Ley. And Willie Ley, he was all about the vril. He was obsessed with the vril. He was a vril theorist, he called himself. And here he is with Werner von Braun. Now, you got to ask yourself, what is this science fiction writer doing hanging out with Werner von Braun? And Willie Ley is a very, very interesting character. He's connected in all kinds of different directions. And we've got a picture here of one of the magazine articles he wrote. And he wasn't all that successful. I mean, you know, he was semi-successful, but he wasn't like some kind of a big-name guy to where all the guys at Paperclip and NASA would want to hang out with him. But he's there connected with Parsons. He's connected with von Braun. And him and Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, they were the thrust here in this Los Angeles Fantasy Society. Now, here's a picture of one of Mr. Ley's magazine articles he wrote. And Let's Build an Extraterrestrial by Willie Ley. And with these guys, too, it came from Mr. Livingston's book on transhumanism. Well, this didn't, but this concept that we've got in 1946, we've got Hubbard and we've got Parsons doing the Babylon working to try to bring forth the magical moon child. And yet, let's build an extraterrestrial. We've got this transhumanism, Frankenstein theme that runs through this whole thing. And Willie Ley was just a big player in this whole thing, and kind of a very mysterious character.
When you link Werner von Braun to these characters as well, that definitely says a lot about the whole NASA program. To me, it does, especially to his affiliation with Disney, which I would wonder if he was affiliated somehow within this group. But this brings to mind so many different possibilities as to why, and I'm sure you'll talk about this, why we see so many things coming to truth within science fiction. Yeah. Not only is there people like you're going to bring forth to us backing it, but you have fallen angels and entities backing this society, and very interesting.
You absolutely do. And for a long time, I actually thought Willie Ley was a scientist, because you can find his picture. He pops up with all these big guys. And he's not. He is just a semi-successful science fiction writer. But he was certainly connected inside and out. And he loved the vril. You know, he was all about the vril. And, of course, that's what the German rocketry programs was all about. That and the Bell Project. It was certainly all about the vril. Now, this is the fella here that is the big daddy. He's the big duck in the pond, Mr. Aleister Crowley. And Mr. Crowley here is pictured in his Masonic regalia. And I'll read a quote from his autobiography, The Confessions of Aleister Crowley. And he was so connected within Freemasonry all over the world. He held the 97th degree of the European Rite of Misery in Memphis, 33rd degree in the Scottish Rite. One of Mr. Crowley's sayings was that he moved in the air of British aristocracy. And this is what he wrote on page 684 of his Confessions. He said, this view was confirmed when the arcane school of John Yarker came to my review. I wrote to the author, who recognized my title to 33rd degree and conferred on me the grades of 95th degree Memphis and 90th degree Mizraim. It seemed to me as if I had somehow turned on a tap. From this time on, I lived in a perfect shower of diplomas. from Bucharest to Salt Lake City, I possess more exalted titles than I have ever been able to count. I am supposed to know more secret signs, tokens, passwords, grand words, grips, and so on than I could actually learn in a dozen lives. An elephant would break down under the insignia that I am entitled to wear. Was Aleister Crowley a Freemason? He was Super Mason. I mean, he is Super Mason. And Mr. Crowley, when you understand how connected he was, and when you think about Aleister Crowley, he did things that were so disgusting that Satanists had trouble doing them. You know, there was a lot of Satanists couldn't keep up with this guy. He was unbelievably disgusting in such a perverted way. But he was so connected. And with him and Manson, too, we're going to be talking about Manson. The public persona of them is crazy evil person, which they certainly earned that title. And with Manson, he's Mr. Crazy Killer, and he was. But they were so much more than that. They were so much more than that. They were huge players in shaping the change there that we saw, and that I was so much of a part. I was been there doing that right there at the time.
You know, when I'm thinking about these things too, David, and I don't want to get ahead of us or anything like that, but I remember you talking about, I think it was Padre Pio, how these demonic entities would just beat the tartar out of them.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that these people who we see as movers and shakers didn't have the same things going on with them, just getting beat and just controlled by these entities to a point to where, you know, Crowley willingly put himself in situations of great harm consistently by taking large amounts of drugs, eating fecal matter, doing disgusting, horrifying things. But can you imagine the life that they actually live? And I just can't help but think about how they try to make it look so glamorous, but yet like underneath it's just rotten. You know, it's like the cheese is on the trap, and you see that cheese, but you don't see that trap that just snaps down on these people's heads. It's just disgusting. Aleister Crowley is a great example of somebody who just got deteriorated by demonic entities.
Yeah, just absolutely taken over. And I've been reading in more about Dennis Hopper and the amount of alcohol and drugs that he claimed to consume. It sounds unbelievable. Yeah, it just sounds like the guy was lying, that no human being could actually consume that many intoxicants. And the crazy things that Mr. Hopper did. I mean, he was known for just doing absolute crazy things, death-defying things that just absolutely could have killed him. And he would, at one point, he was down in the Amazon, and he just took all of his clothes off and walked off naked into the jungle. And they didn't see him again for a good while, but he'd pop back up. Well, I mean, he would just do absolutely crazy things, and he was absolutely in the middle of this in so many different directions.
Yeah.
Now, there's another fella here. He's another fella probably none of you have heard of, and he is Mr. Carl Germer, and he became the head of the OTO when Mr. Crowley died, and he got possession of Aleister Crowley's library and all of his personal papers. And there was through people he initiated, there was another lodge formed that was called the Solar Lodge. And the first lodge was the Agape Lodge that was run of the Ordo Templi Orientis. We had John Carradine and Dennis Hopper over there. And here in what was called the Solar Lodge of the Ordo Templi Orientis, this fella here was a member of that. Charlie Manson was in the Solar Lodge of the OTO. And we also we're going to connect Mr. Manson to the Church of the Final Process, Robert de Grimston. And the dots and the spokes go out here in so many directions. And in this Solar Lodge, the Solar Lodge was founded in 1965. And in 1965, the Solar Lodge the in 69, the Solar Lodge, the Ordo Templar Orientis in Los Angeles was raided, and they found a 6-year-old boy in a 6-foot by 6-foot metal cage, and his left foot was chained to a metal plate in that cage. And when the police came in and they freed the boy, and multiple people were arrested and charged, and that was the end of the Solar Lodge of the Ordo Templar Orientis. And after that, there were other OTO lodges. Well, they're not real OTO. You know, they're a clandestine lodge. They're not a part of us. But they actually were accused, and Grady McMurtry, who became the head of the OTO, he accused the boys down at the Solar Lodge of stealing Aleister Crowley's library and personal papers from Carl Germer's widow. So Charlie there, you know, Charlie was there reading firsthand out of Crowley's books and out of Crowley's papers. And no wonder Charlie turned out to be the guy that he did. But Charlie Manson, you know, everyone knows Helter Skelter, the brutal, insane things that him and the family did, but there's so much more to this guy. And he is very connected to our area here in Indiana because as a young teen, he was in a Jesuit school here in Indiana. It's right up here in Vincennes, Indiana, the Father Gibralt School for Boys. And we have I don't have it here, but there was an article there in the Indianapolis Star actually about Charlie when he was older, probably about 13, how that they were trying to rehabilitate him. But I don't think the Jesuits did Charlie much good, and he wound up going to prison, and he got released from prison in 1967, and we're going to show you the fellow that got a hold of Charlie in 1967, and we'll see this fellow's picture right here. Another one of these guys you never hear of, but his name is Robert Hanna Felix. And when Mr. Manson was released from prison in 1967, he went to a clinic that was a project of this fellow right here. And I'll read you a little of his pedigree from Mr. Livingston's book. He said the clinic was a project of National Institute of Mental Health, which was founded by Robert Hanna Felix, which is the fellow we're looking at right here. 33rd degree Mason, who was director of the Scottish Rites Psychiatric Research. And what a lot of people aren't aware of, there are a lot of hospitals that Freemasonry has, big ones, and a big one in Chicago and all over. And he was Mr. Big in Freemasonry and in the mental health. It says, it was later revealed that as part of MK Ultra under Dr. Felix, Dr. Harris Isbell carries out experiments using mainly black drug addicts at the Addiction Research Center in Lexington, Kentucky. And Mr. Manson, through this fellow right here, this is where he went when he got out of jail in 67. We have a direct connection to MK Ultra. And Mr. Manson, a lot of this, all the crazy publicity, it's to hide something much more deep with Mr. Manson. And we're going to see as we continue to connect these dots that Charlie Manson played a huge role. Now, here's another guy. Go ahead, John.
Just want to add one thing to, because since we're past Crowley here, I just wanted to say something. There, I found from this is taken from a Crowley website, and it says that Crowley actually attended John Nelson Darby Church as a child and would go and listen intently, and so that kind of, in a way, connects that whole Darby Protestant. I wouldn't say Protestant movement, but the dispensationalist movement. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's a well-known fact that his parents were zealous Plymouth Brethren and Darbyites. Absolutely. Now, here's a fella I remember back in the day, Freak Out, Hungry Freak's daddy. Frank Zappa. He was the granddaddy of the hippie movement. And Mr. Zappa and his band was called the Mothers of Invention, and a lot of it was kind of bizarre jazz and just total freaked out hippie LSD stuff. But Mr. Zappa, he was the first one to like open up a commune, and he had a big house. He bought a big house there in LA, and there were so many people that were running away at that time to go out to Laurel Canyon and out to LA to live the hippie dream. And he opened up a house where runaways could come to. And this was the first of many that took in youngsters and teenagers like that. But here's something you might not know about Frank Zappa. When you look into who his father was, Frank Zappa's father, he was a chemical specialist. He was assigned to the Edgewood Arsenal. This was a facility frequently connected with MK Ultra and the work of Andrea Puharich. And this guy, I mean, that's, could there be more to Frank Zappa coming from this family? And we're going to see huge figures, the people that really shape things. They were connected to secret societies. They were connected to military intelligence. And my goodness, who would have thought old Frank's dad was a chemical weapons specialist that was connected with MK Ultra? Who would have thought it? Now, a fellow there, and Frank Zappa, he started what was called the Treehouse. And the Treehouse was basically a place where this fella here came, Mr. Leary, and the LSD flowed freely. And LSD was the big thing back in the 60s, and it wasn't illegal. I can't remember the year it was made illegal, but Timothy Leary would pass out LSD by the thousands of tabs before it was declared illegal. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the bust out about that. But the thing about LSD and Mr. Leary, and here at the Treehouse, it was called the Treehouse, and I mean, Mick Jagger and Marianne Faithfull would hang out there, Jimmy Page, everybody that was anybody in the whole Laurel Canyon movement, and even in the British, the people from Britain, they were there. The whole rock and roll genre, they were there at Frank Zappa's Treehouse, and Mr. Leary was there, and the acid did flow. Now, we were a little bit ahead of our time. I'll plug here a book. This is our book on the Golden Dawn, and we wrote about that extensively, Don and I, in our book on the Golden Dawn, and trying to see what year this came out. This is a 2003 edition, but the book's older than that. But anyway, I'll read a little bit from a book here by Robert Anton Wilson, who was also a member of the Golden Dawn and every secret society you could think of. And Anton Wilson, back in the day, he was a columnist for Playboy magazine. And in the 60s, Playboy magazine became the cool thing, and it was like the voice of the counterculture. And Robert Anton Wilson, he was the columnist, and he was a personal friend of Leary. And everything going in Chicago, the Chicago 7, and the whole deal there, he was right in the middle of all of it. Now, I'll read a couple of things, and he visited I think like 7, I don't know how many times. He visited Leary many times when he was in Vacaville prison, and was all about picking Mr. Leary's brain, and Mr. Leary was all about picking other people's brains. But anyway, I'll read a couple of things from this book written by Anton Wilson, The Cosmic Trigger. And this is what Mr. Leary said. He said, "That's the whole point. LSD, with the right set and setting, can change anything we consider ourselves. Therefore, it is the most potent brainwashing agent in the world." Now, Mr. Leary learned that because he worked for the state of Massachusetts, and he was actually conducting experiments on prisoners in the Massachusetts prison system. He was doing that in the 50s, And from there, he goes out to California and he starts passing out LSD like a wild man. And he gets in there with the Treehouse and Zappa, and he becomes connected to anybody that's everybody in the rock and roll scene and everything that's going on out there in LA and Laurel Canyon. Now, here's another fella that most people know on sight, Jim Morrison of the Doors. And he named his band after the book by Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. But what a lot of people don't know is who Jim Morrison's father is. Admiral George Morrison, Admiral. He's the guy that started the Vietnam War with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the false flag operation. This is the guy, Admiral George Morrison. And there was another admiral that we've talked about, another Navy admiral by the name of Admiral Byrd. Now, it's very interesting in Jim Morrison and the Doors, their 1971 album, the L.A. Woman album, I believe. There's a song on there called Little America, L-I-L, Little America, which was the name of the base in Antarctica. So, you know, and he claims in this song to gone down there. So I don't know. It's just strange, but who would have thought that these guys, like Frank Zappa, his daddy's connected to MK Ultra, chemical weapons specialist. We've got Jim Morrison's father. He's an admiral in the Navy, and it goes on and on. There was nobody of a bigger influence in the whole Laurel Canyon scene than this fella here, David Crosby. He went from the Byrds to Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and a huge, huge influence. And his father graduated Annapolis, another Navy man, and he was a military intelligence officer in World War II. Major Floyd Delafield Crosby, military intelligence. When you see a pattern, just raise your hand here. How is it? You know, and all these people, they just look like hippies that fell off the banana truck, but every key player is connected deeply to secret societies, military intelligence over and over again. And we see a definite plan that was instituted to use, and principally LSD was a big part of their plan, to use LSD to absolutely transform the minds of key players. And people are like sheep. And I tell you, back then, I thought, I was so into this, I almost killed myself. You know, I was just all about this. I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so when you're able, you can just trace it back to a handful of key people that when they turned them, not only in the rock and roll, but in the science fiction genre, when you can just turn a few people and transform their mind and their thinking, you can affect millions and millions of people. And literally, by just impacting a few key people there in the late 60s, our nation was changed and transformed.
Yeah, it reminds me, we talked about Hollywood in a show not too long ago, but in the 40s, how after the Battle of L.A., when UFOs were seen all over the sky, and how in the 40s, something transformed in Hollywood to a point to where the military had control over a lot of the films so that they could garner new people to join the military, etc. So they started getting their hooks in. And I imagine they got a taste of that power and that propaganda, and they decided, you know what, we've got to get in here even deeper.
Yeah. And in this book, I'll read another little snippet here from this is The Cosmic Trigger, Anton Wilson, and he talks about mind control, and he just comes out and says, how to mind control people. And I'll just read. Here's from page 140. He said, "In the course of my investigations, I have undergone a number of occult initiations and have become aware of the basic similarities of all such rituals and all traditions. This is the pattern of the death rebirth, which even today appears symbolically in the Roman Catholic Mass and the Masonic raising ceremony. The investigator is betraying no secret when we say that in serious occult orders, such performances are not mere rituals, but real ordeals. Insofar as possible within the law, the candidate is often brought to a state of terror similar to the emergency condition of the nervous system in near-death crises. We've had people tell us, multiple people, that they were buried alive. And then they're buried alive, left down there for a while, then dig them up, and there's no extent to the way that they instill fear. Going on, he says, what occurs then and is experienced as rebirth is a quantum leap in neurological awareness. In Leary's terminology, new circuits are formed and imprinted. And Leary would talk about imprints. And when you can bring a person to a point of terror like that, and you imprint them, and he just goes into great detail how to brainwash people. And the sad thing is, it works. You can brainwash and control people a lot easier than what you might think. But I'll read here something from Mr. Livingston's book here on page 196. And I have thoroughly convinced myself that when you connect the dots, that this thing was just totally orchestrated. And even we've talked about the John Coleman book, The Committee of 300. Mr. Coleman, who was with British intelligence, he claimed that the Beatles were a Tavistock experiment, and I'm not going to argue with Mr. Coleman. But anyway, this is what Mr. Livingston writes on page 196. He said Manson and his family, with which he used LSD to much effect of his control over, were intimately connected with the various rock groups that emerged from Laurel Canyon. These groups were closely associated with Vito Pelucas, his wife Sazo, and Carl Franzoni. Vito also happened to be the first cousin of Eva Paul, wife of Winthrop Rockefeller. Now, this is another interesting thing we're going to see. We're going to see these worthless hippies connected to the richest people in the world, and we're going to see the richest people in the world bankrolling some of the most darkest entities you could ever want to think of. But what Manson did, he had his little family and his little group of hippies, and he learned how to totally mind control them using LSD. Now, he did not stop there, but he took it out onto other key figures in the rock and roll and in the film industry, and he was very successful in being someone that was trained in mind control. And Charlie, he went through the clinic, connected to MK Ultra. I mean, the connections all over the place. And we'll look at another fella here, and we'll just kind of run down a laundry list of some of the people that were deeply, intimately connected with Charlie Manson. And one was Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, and with all the Beach Boys and many others. But he became a very close and very tight with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. And another fella, Mr. Neil Young. And Neil Young was such pals with Charlie, he actually bought Charlie a motorcycle. And they were big proponents, and a lot of these guys, they were promoting Charlie Manson to be big in the rock and roll scene, but Charlie had other ideas. Now, here's another group that when you look at this group, the Mamas and the Papas, and you don't think of down and dirty evil stuff, but the connections, and I hate to say that because I used to love their music, they had just such a great mellow sound, but the connections that come back to these people are frightening. And John Phillips, Papa John, he was a real player. And he was one of the ones that organized in 1967, there was the Monterey Pop and Jazz Festival in Monterey, Mexico. And this was the real breakout event for LSD. LSD was popularized among thousands of kids in Monterrey, Mexico. This was at the orchestration of Papa John. And this also had introduced Jimi Hendrix to the world down there at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. Mama Cass, who could sing like an angel. Charlie Manson spent a lot of time hanging out at Mama Cass's house doing acid. She, of all of these, Manson was more connected to her than any of them. But they were, you know, and I hate to say it, but the facts are the facts. Now, this next young lady is Mackenzie Phillips. Her father was John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. She was on this TV show in the 70s, One Day at a Time, which was popular. I don't think I've ever watched an episode, but I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. But she has been very vocal saying that for over 10 years, her father would rape her and had a sexual relationship with her father for over 10 years. And she went through a terribly dark time. She was pregnant and thought it was by her father. And needless to say, that can make you very suicidal. She also claims that her father raped her on the eve of her marriage. Now, Michelle, who was the lady, she was married to Papa John Phillips. Michelle Phillips was her name. And after she broke up with John Phillips, guess who she married? This guy right here, Mr. Dennis Hopper again. After she divorced John Phillips, she marries Dennis Hopper, Agape Lodge, OTO. And the connections just keep going and going and going. She married Dennis Hopper in 1970 and divorced him in 1970. Didn't last real long. But after that, she took up with another fellow you might know by the name of Warren Beatty. Now, what a lot of people don't know is who Warren Beatty's blood sister is. And it's Miss Shirley MacLaine, who at the time, she was the big mover and shaker in the New Age movement. And Michelle goes on from Dennis Hopper to Warren Beatty. The girl got around. You got to hand her that. And after that, her next boyfriend was Jack Nicholson. And Jack Nicholson, he's also known for a little bit of bizarre behavior. And Jack Nicholson and Dennis Hopper, and I think Nicholson was an easy rider. I don't want to say it wrong, but I know Dennis Hopper was an easy rider. Jack Nicholson was in the trip. No, I'm going to get it mixed up, so I'm not going to say. I think Dennis Hopper was in the trip, too. But anyway, Dennis Hopper shows up in this film here called Easy Rider. Now, Easy Rider, it was a seismic blast in the counterculture. I mean, this was the movie. It was the cool thing. Its impact was huge. Get your motor running. Head out on the highway, and away you go. Drop out, freak out, and it was huge. And Easy Rider was directed by the art director was Jeremy Kay of the Solar Lodge of the OTO. Who would have thought it? But over and over and over again, the connections from these two lodges of the Ordo Templi Orientis, they just keep coming together, and these connections are undeniable, and they're just interwoven in so many different directions. Now, this is a fella that is another player. His name is Robert de Grimston, and he had a little thing going called the Church of the Final Judgment. It was called the Process Church, and they were absolutely hardcore Satan worshipers. And guess where they were located? 2 blocks from Charlie Manson's house. You can't make it up. 2 blocks from Charlie Manson's house, and de Grimstead called their group the Family. Just like Mr. Manson, he called his little group the Family. Now, Robert de Grimston, he is also connected in all kinds of different directions. And one of the, he was connected with Marianne Faithfull, who is Mick Jagger's girlfriend. We're going to talk more about her in just a little bit. But she was on the cover of one of the Processes magazines, and I mean, they were just absolutely hardcore. And I'll read just a little bit. There's, in this book here called The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry, there's a really good chapter on the Church of the Final Process, and they were so connected, it's scary, and they were just absolute Satan worshipers. And this book, more by the Ultimate Evil, this was written by a fellow by the name of Maury Terry, and it's based on the son of Sam. And one of the first murders that the son of Sam committed was at a disco called the Eliphas Disco. And he was using the rituals from Eliphas Levi, and he absolutely was using the magical workings of Eliphas Levi. And that is just an established fact with Mr. Berkowitz. But Maury Terry was an investigator for Geraldo Rivera back in the day when Geraldo was doing some really good investigative reporting, and Maury Terry worked for Geraldo Rivera. And this book is a hoot. And there's a great chapter in this book on the process. But I'll read just a little snippet from this on page 190. He said, by sharing Crowley's beliefs, the process also blended those of the Order of the Golden Dawn. The Golden Dawn was an English occult society to which Crowley belonged in the late 19th century. The Golden Dawn believed in Kabbalistic magic and taught that the will could be trained to accomplish paranormal effects, including astral projection. The Golden Dawn also strongly believed in symbolism, teaching that certain symbols or thoughts had the same meaning for all human beings. In fact, many believe that the entire occult underground in America can be traced back to the formation of that Crowley OTO operation in Pasadena. And I could not agree more. We started there tonight, and from there, you can just draw lines to all of this, and you can see the interconnectedness of it, that in my mind, to deny a guiding hand in all of this, it's just silly.
It reminds me of that interview that Roseanne Barr did where she said that, the guy, I can't remember who was interviewing her, and he said that, good for you for coming out and speaking out against this. And she said that somebody came and thanked her for speaking out because they couldn't do it. Because she said because they're scared because MK Ultra rules Hollywood. She said that, quoted saying that.
Yeah.
And she wasn't just saying that. It sounds like she's legitimately telling people this is what's going on. And I see such an awakened movement to show these things. And the fact that you could get all this information, put it all out there, it shows that they can't really hide anymore. Yeah. And I really hope that retribution comes for some of this stuff, because this is awful. I mean, I feel so sorry for the people that unwittingly were involved, born into this, incest and all these horrible things. I mean, it's just so horrible. And then the things that happen, David, we've been contacted before by people from Hollywood that are in there. Yeah. They're so frightened, so messed up, so triggered, and there's just so many things, and it's just, man, we really need to pray for these people that are wrapped up in this. There's no doubt.
I won't mention the name, but on one of the midnight rides we were doing, I was naming some people by name that were quite famous, and we actually were contacted by a son of one of these famous individuals. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. And that person told me, and if a lie fry, that everything I said was true and even more. And that was chilling. And I had after that time, I had 2 or 3 more phone conversations with this man, and after that, just broke off contact with me, wouldn't talk to me anymore. But this is real. This is real, and it's scary. And I'm just me. I can find this stuff. I just dig it out. I research it and I dig it out. It's there, and it is what it is, and it's not very pretty. And going to talk about another guy in the OTO. This is Mr. Kenneth Anger, and you see, he likes Lucifer. He likes Lucifer so much he tattooed his name on his chest. And Kenneth Anger was a filmmaker for the Ordo Templar Orientis. One of his films was called the Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome. Another one was called The Invocation of My Demon Brother. You don't even have to watch that. The title tells it all. And one of his most famous films was called Lucifer Rising. And the fellow that did the music for that, we have Mr. Anger from the OTO. And the guy that did the music was Bobby Bousalil, who also played Lucifer, Bousalil from the Charlie Manson family. Now, the young lady that played Lilith in this film, Mick Jagger's girlfriend, Marianne Faithfull, who we're going to run her pedigree down. Also, Marianne Faithfull appeared, she was Jagger's girlfriend all through the mid to the late 60s. And Marianne Faithfull also appeared on one of the magazine covers of the magazine of the Church of the Final Process with the Grimston. I mean, and back in the late 60s, they'd go out on Hollywood Boulevard, and they would pass out their magazines, and it would, like on the cover, it would be like a naked woman on an altar with the sacrifice, stuff like that. I mean, it was hardcore, blatant, in-your-face Satanism. And they were recruiting big time of all the kids that were coming out there to L.A. And Mr. Anger also, Jimmy Page and Mick Jagger worked on this film, Lucifer Rising. And what's interesting, and he made all kinds of films, but I mean, you ain't gonna see none of these down at the movie house. None of this made any money to speak of for Mr. Anger. And he always lived very well, and come to find out, the fellow that was writing the checks for Kenneth Anger was John Paul Getty, one of the richest men in the world. He also received large donations from the Ford Foundation. And I tell you what, he was he was out there. He was out there, I guarantee you. And he was connected every which way but loose with he lived in San Francisco. Everybody in the San Francisco scene, the whole Laurel Canyon scene, the British rock movement, Page, Jagger, the whole bunch. This guy was in with it all. And he was a real mover and shaker. Now, I mentioned this lady right here, Marianne Faithfull. And sweet little angelic-looking English girl, Mick Jagger's girlfriend from the mid to the late 60s. But like I say, she turned up on the cover of one of the magazines of the Church of the Final Process. She played Lilith in Lucifer Rising, Kenneth Anger's OTO film. And who was this girl really? Who was she? She was the one. She gave Mick Jagger the book and the idea for Sympathy for the Devil. Probably one of the darkest anthems and some of the Rolling Stones' darkest work. Sister Morphine, and a lot of the titles are embarrassing to say. And I hate to say it, but back in the day, they were my band. And this stuff almost killed me. I mean, it just almost killed me. It just, that's not an exaggeration at all, just almost killed me. And back then, you're either a Beatles person or Rolling Stone person. And I was a Rolling Stone person. I thought they were just the greatest thing since sliced bread. But so much of the dark inspiration for the Rolling Stones come from this little girl right here. And was it the boys leading the girls bad, or was it the girls leading the boys bad? And we're going to talk about her, and we're going to talk about another girl that was called the Muses of the Rolling Stones. Now, let me give you the rundown of Miss Marianne Faithfull. Her father was Robert Glenn Faithfull of British intelligence. Her grandfather was a prominent person in the Habsburg dynasty. Her great uncle coined the word masochism and was a writer of erotic novels. Venus in Furs was one of his famous books. But the influence of this little girl was huge. And she was pure Habsburg, military intelligence. You know, after a while, how can this many people that were so influential be connected to military intelligence? You know, it's just over and over and over.
Yeah. And there's Habsburg was, and I don't know if it was which Habsburg it was, but I remember in the last show we talked about a lawsuit involving Hollywood and Habsburg. I didn't bring any information on that, but if people look it up, there's some kind of lawsuit with Habsburg and Hollywood. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And of course, the Habsburgs, we've talked about them many times. They're one of the blue blood royal families and lines that go all the way back. They're hugely connected with the whole Despacini Nephilim bloodline. And here's another young lady that was deeply involved with the Rolling Stones. Her name was Anita Pallenberg. And bless her heart, she had a bad memory. She couldn't remember which one to go to bed with next, I guess. I know. She started out Brian Jones. She was the girlfriend of Brian Jones. He was the Rolling Stone that died in the 60s. But he was kind of a rough guy. He would beat his women. And Anita didn't like that, and who could blame her? And after that, she became openly involved with Keith Richards. And with Keith Richards, she had 2 children with Keith Richards. And also, she was very openly involved with Mr. Mick Jagger. And she was from the Pallenberg family in Cologne, another one of these rich, elite European families, big money, big connections. She just didn't wander off on the street. She was connected big time. And her family paid for her to go to school in New York. Her family was, they were connected. They were movers and shakers. And she had a very confusing influence on poor Mick. And in this next picture here, you know, who's that ugly woman? Man, I tell you talk about one ugly woman. Well, yeah, that's Mick. Yeah, that's our boy Mick. Yeah. The old rambling, gambling man himself. And there he is with Anita, and Anita would dress Mick up like a woman, put lipstick on him, and Mick just got all confused, bless his little heart. But yeah, Anita had quite the effect there on several of the Rolling Stones. I think Charlie, well, anyway, at least for 3 of them, she was openly, very intimately connected with. And Mick Jagger, like at this time, this is where Mick went wild. This is from, and of course they weren't down-home boys. I'm not exonerating them at all by any means. But here's Mr. Jagger with his Baphomet tattoo, rock and roll circus, and he just got all about it. And the bottom line is, when I look at all this material and I begin to connect the dots, and it gets personal for me because I was so caught up in this whole thing, and I just thought it was great at the time. And it took the Lord for me to see the lie of it, and now to be able to look back and see how deep that lie was. Everything that happened here, and from this time, and so much in music. You know, the Mr. Jagger there and the things that he was doing, they were more shocking back then because not many people were doing them. They were the trailblazers. And Mr. Jagger and well, there's a lot of other people we could talk about, but the basic thing about this evening is that these things did not happen by accident. They were orchestrated. There was a guiding hand behind it. There was big money, big influence. The ties to secret societies and to military intelligence, they're just so frequent that I think we ignore them at our own risk to be so naive to think that this whole thing wasn't born out of secret societies and these illuminous think tank groups.
And one thing that I've learned from this and learned from my own childhood, just like you were saying, David, the music industry is steeped with demonic influence, and that's really the whole point of it. And I remember back in the 90s, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 82. I was a teenager in the 90s, and the culture back then was rebellion. You had Nirvana, you had Green Day, you had all of these artists that were all about rebelling against society, doing whatever you can, shock rock, doing whatever you can to kind of rebel. And that really shaped the people that are my age now. We're talking 40s plus. The people that are my age now are the ones that are in control, which is scary, because that generation cared nothing about preserving life, cared nothing about preserving their own life even. It was all about the party, all about how can we shock society, how can we ruin society. And it is so clear that dominates. And then you've got the people like David's age from that era that are in control of politics right now, that are in the top, that have maneuvered politics in the way that the hippies designed it to be maneuvered. And we're seeing the results of this. I mean, the music the kids are growing up with now, I don't even know what's out there, but I've happened to come across a music video, and it's so disgusting, so perverted, that I can't imagine what the next generation that grows up is going to be like because of the music and the Hollywood culture. And we can't do enough as parents, I think, to keep our children away from this influence. Even David, you said it almost ruined you. Well, I would say
Yeah,
the same
almost
thing.
killed me. I mean, just almost totally killed me. That's not an exaggeration at all. And if it wasn't for the Lord, it would have killed me. And that's why we're doing this tonight, that people can see there's an evil hand behind this, and that Jesus is the way. He can bring you out of whatever trap you've fallen into. And the fella that blazed the way for cross-dressing and transgenderism was Frank Zappa. And him and his band, Mothers of Invention, and there's actually one of their albums where on the cover they're all dressed like women. And this would be like in 1966, they would go out and they would play and they would dress up like women. They would go play their gig dressed like women. And back then, they'd get beat up and the people would throw tomatoes at them, And they would just do that and enrage people. And they'd do it again. And, why were they, it's like, you're going to go, you're going to get beat up, you're going to get hit with tomatoes. Well, why are you doing it? Well, they were being paid to do it. Yeah. I believe with all my heart. They were being paid to it. They broke down that you break down those barriers and you kick down that door. And, Frank Zappa and all of these people, the persona that we see of them, there's so much more behind these figures that was nothing about it was coincidental in the way that it came down. But the main thing, turn to Jesus before it's too late. Don't be... like John said, the things that are today, this generation is so evil, it's hard to see how there could be another generation after this one. It is so evil. You just don't see how this thing is go on and on and on. But Jesus is the answer. Whatever you've been involved in, whether Satanism, there have been many people saved out of Satanism that have actually gone so far as to worship the Dark Lord. You can repent. You can come to Jesus. Whatever you've been in or done, you can repent to come to him. So just turn to Jesus, place your faith in him, and that's what this is all about.
I like it, David, and I just want to say that that is really the key to all of this, because escaping this system that we're involved in, people don't quite maybe understand what we've been born into. The Bible tells us we enter in through the matrix, and this is the womb, right? We're entering into this world from the womb into a world that is actually in control by an underboss called Satan, right? He is in control of the world. He's the king of this world right now. The Bible says he's the prince and the power of the air. And everything is designed to distract us from our goal, which is to find God and to live a life that is a normal human life that we should be living, that is blessing others, being good, and doing the things that we're supposed to do. But there's this element, and you said something, David, just a minute ago that reminds me so much of what's going on right now. You said that even though people hated the stuff they did. Sometimes they get up on stage dressed like women, or they do these movies that were just sick and disgusting. They just kept pumping them out because they were getting funded by someone else. It's the same with the woke movement. The woke movement just keeps pumping these movies out that make them lose massive amounts of money, but they just don't care because they know that somebody's going to fund them, the devil's going to fund them, and they're going to keep pushing it till it's so normal that no one bats an eye anymore at seeing these horrifying things. Evil has truly become good, and good has truly become evil in this world. And it is a sad thing. We got to pray, and we've got to lift up our voices and lift up our hearts, man.
We sure do. There's so many young people that are out there that are being just pulled into so many directions and so many things that they need to hear the gospel. They need to hear that truth is in the Word of God, that Jesus saves. And they don't have to go down that dark road, because it's only death and destruction. That's where it always ends.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Hit the subscribe button if you are not subscribed already. We do this every single week, and so we're happy to do it. We're thankful to do it. As long as you guys will keep listening, we'll keep doing it. So we also do this thing where we all pound the like button together. So we're going to do it on the count of 3. You ready, David? Here we go.
1, 2, 3.
Boom. Boom. We have felt it all the way over here. Thank you guys so much. David, end us out.
Well, as always, it's with great thankfulness to each and every one of you that listen to the Midnight Ride, that pray for us and support us. We thank you so much, and of course are thankful to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for allowing us one more broadcast. And we're always thankful each and every time we get to be on this format and lift up our Lord and Savior and put forth that glorious gospel. So with that, until 10 p.m. Central next Saturday night, high five and good night, everybody, from the Midnight Ride.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up, rise up, rise up.